What are your favorite historical fiction novels? Hey friends, I'm Courtney and welcome to my channel. If you haven't already watched it, I suggest watching my latest vlog on celebrating women writers. So some of my favorite new to me novels that were written by women and some other ones from back in the day that still have great value and still have a lot of meaning to my life and things that I want to take with me as I get older. Also, feel free to follow my Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook channels for some more bookish content that you won't find here because I post on there a little bit more frequently than I do on my BookTube channel. So today I'm covering some different and unique perspectives on historical fiction or things in history. So it's funny, when my book club met, we haven't met in a while, but when we did, we had some kind of fascination with World War II novels. So we'd read The Nightingale, we had read The Alice Network, and a few others, and we were just like they were interesting stories for sure, but it was kind of draining after a while because most of them were pretty sad, and well, like we know what the result was of World War II and the Holocaust and all of that happening over the 6 years, but it's still very heavy, but it's still important to learn about as it comes to history, and then putting them into a historical fiction context, it adds a lot of like familial kind of feelings and a lot of heart into the situations that people found themselves in. This could also be found in nonfiction history narratives, but we chose the historical fiction ones. But that just made me think about some other novels that I've read, and it is one of my favorite genres to read. I just like the different perspectives that authors are using, the research that goes into it, and I know there are elements that do have truth in it and ones that have been kind of dramatized or used for more like entertainment and engagement purposes, but it still is a great story, and it allows, particularly for me, allows me to understand that point in history a little bit differently. So I have some books here that may or may not have been on your like most read list or bestsellers list, but they have some great perspectives, like I was saying, and just different takes on what we know when it comes to history. And there is one that is around World War II, but the rest of them are kind of all over the map as it comes to different countries and different times in the world's history. So the first book I have is The Gilded Years by Karin Tanabe, and this is a book that I did read with my book club a while ago, and this one, it kind of made me angry, and that's why I think I rated it low, but I think that shouldn't have been the reason why I rated it low. I was angry because the story details a young woman who is African American or Black and is able to pass as white and goes to a all-white female college in Vassar, and she is roomed with like a socialite or like a really famous young lady in New York's like prominent family in New York, and they become best friends. And then Anita is her name of the main character who is passing. She ends up dating a like nice boy that is like down the road or attends like a college in New York that also is like very like up there in prestige and everything. But back home where she's from, like her brother, Anita's brother, is also Black, but he's a little bit darker, so he's not fully like it could go either way when looking at him, and she notes that a few times as she's having like internal dialogues or like thinking about how she wants to communicate with some of her friends that she's made at Vassar. But then her brother comes into town, and like there's some rumblings about like what's going on here. He looks like darker. Is he Black? Is she Black? And then it kind of just unfolds into just terrible actions and words said and friendships broken because of this lie, I guess, which it just made, I think that's what made me so frustrated, is that these people that were her friends or were dating her dismissed her once they knew she was Black, but was like pretending to be white or whatever. But it does speak a lot of truth because this is what happens. Like this was a thing. It's just troubling because like identity is so important when like in terms of like yourself, how you identify and like what you're proud of in terms of that, and like not having to hide, but then feeling that you need to in order to get ahead and to get a better education, which is what Anita was doing. So she risked a lot, and this is based off a true story, so it is more history than fiction, but there, like I said, there's probably still some dramatization in there. But yeah, it just made me angry that that she lost so much after being discovered or whatever. But like that, it didn't need to be that way, right? Like I wish that she was able to attend as her full self and not have to hide, but I know that wasn't the reality back then. When was this? In 1897. So yeah, it's heart-wrenching, it's sad, but it's also like a wake up call too, of like what we have to go through, or what folks that aren't maybe privileged or maybe different skin tones or different types of identities have to do in order to get ahead and to be successful and like have the life that they want. And then we have The Night Portrait by Laura Morelli. So this was gifted to me by the author close to, I think, when quarantine started. I can't really remember, but this is a different take on World War II, which I am obsessed with, especially since it has to do with art history. So I was an art history major in college up until, well, I graduated with an art history degree. I had started with studio art, with interior design, graphic design, and computer animation, and then switched into art history. But then didn't end up doing any of those things after I graduated, but I still appreciate the stories behind artwork and like seeing beautiful pieces of art in wherever I go, like when going to different museums or seeing things online, as we are doing a lot of virtual tours and looking at museums and things like that. But this details the story of, it's kind of two different stories going on. It's the time period of Leonardo da Vinci, who painted the Duke of Milan's mistress, which is, I can't really see, it's this bottom photo right here. I think there's a bigger picture on the inside. Let me see. This one was the picture that he had painted, and then we go forward in time to World War II, where an art historian or art conservationist is trying to protect a lot of art that's being like shipped or, I don't know, kind of transported to kind of like wealthy Germans and Nazi families throughout the war. So she's trying to protect these paintings, make sure it doesn't get into the wrong hands or get damaged. And she wants that piece of work like not in that person's hands. So she wants to protect it at all costs. So she teams up with an American soldier and then the monuments men who are tasked with protecting artwork. So it's just an interesting, like, who knew? I didn't know that was a thing during World War II, but there are a lot of stories like that where there are acts of bravery that aren't necessarily like on the front lines of war that are happening for people to survive and to do what they believe in. So I love that it again switches between two different time periods of Leonardo da Vinci's time and like him getting to know his muse or like the mistress in the painting and like what she went through because she was a mistress. She ended up getting pregnant, and then once that happened, she was like of no use to the Duke anymore because he didn't have to deal with that. So I don't know, just a lot. I guess it's two different pieces of history there of back in Italian Renaissance time and then World War II when it comes to art and art history. Then we have Julian Fellowes' Belgravia, and this I picked up because Julian Fellowes is the, I think, writer or producer of Downton Abbey, which is a show I absolutely love. I saw the movie in theaters, had a whole afternoon tea day with my girlfriends beforehand, and then went to go see the premiere, so absolutely loved it, loved the story, and heard that he wrote a book, so I decided to pick this up as well. So this is set like way earlier than Downton Abbey. So this is like early to mid 1800s, and this details the story of kind of like two different families, the lies they tell each other and they tell people in their family as it comes to the birth of a grandson or son by a woman and man who lost their lives in the Battle of Waterloo, I believe, or sometime close to it after the birth of the child, and like the legitimacy or the illegitimacy of the child. Were they married? Were they out of wedlock when they had the child, and what that child is deserving of when it comes to inheritance, and what other members of the family will do to make sure that that doesn't happen because that they think that money is theirs and like that title and everything that goes with it. So lots and lots of drama and interesting parts of like the society of like British aristocrats during the, like I said, 1800s, early to mid 1800s. And yeah, family, what that means. It deals with ambition, rage, loyalty, all kinds of things. And like, it packs so much into it, and like It is probably just as dramatic as Downton Abbey, to be honest, but a different take on like family drama. Then we have Pachinko by Min Jin Lee, and this I read as part of my Read Around the World challenge that could be set in either Korea or Japan. So this details the 4 generations of a family from Korea as they immigrate to Japan for kind of different reasons, safety, but just to start anew, but then how they're treated as Koreans in Japan and how terrible that has been. And I talked about passing in the Gilded Years, but there's also some passing being done in Pachinko, where one of the generations, they are trying to pass off as Japanese in order to get a better life for themselves, but then ended up cuts off the rest of their family and kind of wants to like separate themselves from that. But it's heartwarming, but also devastating to see the family like as it continues to grow, and the people they meet, the friendships they make, and people they either gain or lose as a result of like the immigration or just the things going on within the cities and the country itself. But to see the strength of that family for the most part, like make it through those generations, is just amazing. And yeah, I'm not familiar with multi-generation families and what that is like, but it's cool to see how at least the main character, well, all of them are main characters when it comes to the multi-generation family, but how like the grandson and the grandmother have like a really strong relationship, and then even I think at a point there's a great grandson and the great grandmother. So I like those kind of stories where you can pass on like knowledge and stories and just that sense of family from like so many different people that are a part of it. So yeah, pretty chunky book, rich narratives, rich writing, and like it is a little bit of a slower read, but you're gaining so many details and like relationship building as it continues throughout the novel. Then we have Brooklyn by Colm Tóibín, sorry, I can't pronounce that, but this was one of my favorite books like when I first started getting into historical fiction. And this details Ailish, who is a young woman from Ireland who immigrates to the United States, mainly Brooklyn in New York, to take up a job there that pays more than what she was making at home or what her sister would have been making if she were to travel to the US, but wasn't able to. So she finds a small Irish American community that she becomes a part of, but still feels alone and lonely and like still trying to find her place. But then she meets an Italian American boy, Tony, at like this dance, and they kind of hit it off, and she starts to feel like home, but like some things back home in Ireland kind of make her regret coming and like wondering if she should go back home or stay in New York with her new life. But I absolutely love this because it, like I said, it talks about immigration in the time following World War II. So not World War II particularly, but post World War II. So I will take it as a non World War II novel or historical fiction novel. So yeah, that was what was happening with a lot of, I guess, in Europe and probably other places in the world where folks were immigrating to different countries for better opportunities, and what that experience was like, and like the relationships they built once they were in the new country. Finally, we have The Painted Veil by W. Somerset Maugham, and this I remember seeing the movie, and it has Edward Norton playing the male lead of the story, but it's about a husband and wife in Britain in the 1920s who ended up moving to Hong Kong during a cholera epidemic because the gentleman is like a doctor or like understands disease and things like that. And the main reason they decide to go is because the wife was having an affair and wanted, or the husband wanted them to kind of like start over again and go to kind of a remote place where maybe the environment changing will kind of rekindle their relationship, or they can kind of start over again. But I just remember seeing the movie and just loving the dichotomy between what they were used to, like being brought up in England and like British society, and then being forced to go into an area where that's not really a thing, and you have to build your own kind of group of people and like your community there, and like what that means for learning a different culture, a different language, a different style of living. And I just loved it so much, of, like I said, like the growth that happened for both of them together and individually. So it is pretty devastating to read some of the parts. Like I said, it's in the middle of an epidemic and they are still grappling with the infidelity and what that means for them moving forward. But overall, just such a beautiful story of forgiveness, of adapting a new culture as part of your home, as part of who you are. And yeah, so absolutely brilliant and very, very small, thin paperback, but amazing story that packs a lot in. So those are all the historical fiction novels I have for you all today. I do have some other ones that I would like to have shared, but I don't have the physical copy, so maybe I'll list them in the description down below for some other ideas. But yeah, I'd love to hear from you all of any other historical fiction novels you've read that might be like off the beaten path a little bit, or tells like a different story from like a big event that has happened in world history, or maybe you didn't know about through the normal teachings in your education system. And I remember when the Poppy War is a little bit different by R.F. Kuang. Like that's a high fantasy sci-fi kind of novel that talks a lot about like Asia and the wars that happened there. But I had mentioned in that video that I had not known a lot about Asian history growing up in elementary school through high school. So I found very interesting just to read about. I know it was still fiction and fantasy, but I wanted to do some more research to learn more about Asian history in that regard. So there's stories like that where you wish you would have known more about and you found that in a historical fiction novel and then you read up some more on. Let me know. I love that style. Like I said, this is one of my favorite genres. So let me know in the comments. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up or comment down below. Feel free to hit subscribe and get the notification bell for when I upload videos next, usually on Mondays. Sometimes Mondays and Wednesdays or Mondays and Thursdays, depending on how much I'm able to get done and edit and so on and so forth. I have my wish list and my coffee pages listed below as well if you'd like to support me in a different kind of way. But otherwise, I hope you enjoyed. I hope you have a great day and happy reading.